They said it was just another Saturday night in Dry Creek, but nothing about that night was ordinary not, with a woman standing on the saloon stage, blindfolded with a dirty handkerchief and bound like livestock. Her skin was pale as moonlight, her hair white as snow, drawing jeers from drunkards who'd never seen a woman with albinism before. "Ghost girl!" one of them shouted, and the whole room roared with laughter. But she didn't flinch. Her name was Eliza Mayfield, and though the world saw her as a curiosity or curse, she stood taller than any man there. The auctioneer slapped his palm on the bar, voice slick with mockery. "Rare breed here. Skin like porcelain good for keeping in the shadows or showing off at supper." The crowd chuckled. No one questioned why she was there, or how a human being ended up for sale like a sack of flour. But out back, leaning against a post with calloused hands and a tired heart, a loner rancher named Thaddius Royce listened in silence. And what he heard next made his blood run cold and his boots start to move. Thaddius Royce had come into Dry Creek for one reason: whiskey. 3 days riding fence under the blistering Arizona sun had left his skin cracked, his bones aching, and his patience thin. He hadn't spoken to a soul in weeks, hadn't planned on it either. Folks in town always gave him strange looks, like he carried the ghost of war in his saddlebags. Maybe he did. But the moment he stepped into McCain's saloon and heard that twisted excuse for an auction, all thoughts of whiskey turned to fire. Lot 17, they called her, like a prize hog or a busted mule. Eliza Mayfield stood in a worn blue dress, her arms bound loosely, her eyes sharp even under the filth-covered blindfold. Her albinism white hair, pale lashes, porcelain skin made her stand out like a lantern in the dark. But it was the way she held herself that struck Thad. She wasn't begging. She wasn't weeping. She was watching, calculating. A woman born into a world that wanted to erase her, but who refused to disappear. $50, the auctioneer barked. "Do I hear 60? A man in a bowler hat raised a chubby hand. 60. She'll make a fine housemaid quiet, won't spook the kids. Another voice from the back shouted, 70. I bet she glows in the dark. Thad's jaw tightened. He'd seen things in Warman sold out by their own generals, bodies left in ditches because they weren't the right color, the right name, the right rank. But this was something worse. It was old hatred wearing a new face, and it made his hands curl into fists. McCain, the saloon's greasy owner, was soaking up the bids like a sponge in a spill. His gold teeth glinted every time the price went up, and Thad could tell he wasn't just after money, he was playing a deeper game. Eliza's eyes swept the room and locked on to Thad. Just a moment. But it was enough. In that glance, he saw something most men never saw. In their whole lives' defiance, wrapped in dignity, a silent plea, not for saving, but for recognition. As the bidding reached $80, Thad's hand slid to his belt, where the pouch of silver dollars hung heavy. It was money he'd saved for new breeding stock money that meant growth, survival. But looking at Eliza, hearing the way McCain described her like a rare piece of cattle, that silver felt like blood money in his pocket. And when the auctioneer called 80 going twice, Thad stepped forward. The saloon was thick with cigar smoke and spilled whiskey. Laughter bounced off the timber walls like ricocheted bullets. A piano man in the corner stopped playing, his fingers frozen mid-note. All eyes had turned toward the front of the room, where a makeshift platform had been cleared beside the bar. Standing on that platform was Eliza Mayfield barefoot, bound at the wrists, her white blonde hair cascading over her shoulders like silk from the clouds. Her skin, pale as fresh linen, seemed almost to glow beneath the flickering lantern light. But this glow wasn't admired, it was mocked. "Step right up, gents," barked Vernon McCain, the greasy saloon owner with a silver-tipped cane and a permanent sneer. "She's not sick, not cursed, just born different, and different means valuable." The crowd roared. Drunken ranch hands elbowed each other. slapping the bar and calling out numbers like they were bidding on livestock. One of them hollered, "Ain't never seen skin like that outside a porcelain doll." McCain grinned. "That's right, fellas rare, as a blue moon. You won't find another like her from here to San Antonio. I'll start the bidding at $10. A few coins clattered on the counter. A man in a dusty hat shouted, "12 and I want her to shine my boots." Someone else chimed in, "15 if she don't talk back." A burst of laughter followed, but through it all, Eliza never flinched. Her chin stayed high. Her silence screamed louder than their drunken cruelty ever could. McCain, drunk on power more than bourbon, leaned toward the crowd. "Truth is, I should be charging you just to look at her. You know how many folks would pay to have a creature like this in their parlor? And me?" He tapped his chest. "I'm practically giving her away." The laughter was meaner now. Eliza stood her ground, her eyes scanning the room, not with desperation, but with calculation. She saw men who'd long forgotten decency. She saw others who looked away in shame, knowing this wasn't right but too cowardly to speak. Then, in the back corner, a stool scraped across the floor. Thaddius Royce slowly stood, tall, broad-shouldered, with the quiet dignity of a man who'd spent his life working the land. His wide-brimmed hat cast a shadow over his weathered face, but his voice, when it came cut through the saloon like a rifle shot. He didn't speak yet. Not then. But his presence shifted the room. Eliza noticed him. Not just the man-butt, the way he looked at her. Not as a thing to be owned, but as a human being. She closed her eyes for the briefest second, then opened them again with renewed strength. The auction continued around her, louder, more chaotic, but something had changed. The old rancher in the back wasn't just watching anymore. He was about to act. The bidding had turned into a circus. Coins were flying. Men were shouting numbers just to outdo each other. McCain strutted across the platform like a ringmaster, grinning as if he were proud of the shame he was peddling. And then, like a hammer on an anvil, came a sound that silenced the room. Thaddius Royce tossed a small leather pouch onto the bar. It hit with a heavy clink. The room froze. $100, he said, his voice gravelly but unwavering. "In cash. She's mine." McCain blinked. His smirk slipped just a little. $100 in 1885 wasn't just generous, it was outrageous. That was 3 months' wages for most men in that saloon. Thaddius wasn't bidding to show off. He was ending the game. The room held its breath. "You drunk, old man?" McCain scoffed, recovering. "Or is your eyesight failing? You know what she is, don't you? She ain't right. And besides," he leaned forward, voice slick with poison, "this girl's got history. Word is, she was involved in a killing out in Tucson. You want her? Fine. But it's gonna cost you 5 times that much. She's a wanted woman." Whispers rippled through the crowd. A few men backed away. But Thaddius didn't budge. He stepped forward, eyes locked on Eliza with suspicion, but steady calm. Then he looked at McCain and said, with a quiet force that shook even the loudest heckler, 5 times? Fine, you'll get more than you deserve. And then he pulled from his coat a folded deed weathered from years of sun and sweat. "My ranch," he said plainly, 700 acres, 3 dozen cattle, and a name my father built with his bare hands. I'm offering it all. For her." Gasps echoed through the room. One man nearly dropped his drink. Another cursed under his breath. You could hear the creak of a floorboard in that silence. McCain's mouth opened, but no words came out. For the first time all night, he wasn't in control. Even Eliza looked stunned. Her lips parted slightly, and for a moment her composure faltered. This wasn't pity. This wasn't rescue. This was something else. "I'm not buying a prize," Thaddius said, softer now. "I'm reclaiming dignity for her and for every soul you've tried to put a price on." No one spoke. Even the piano man lowered his head. And just like that, the balance in the room shifted from McCain's swagger to a quiet, powerful defiance that stood tall in the boots of an old widowed rancher. Just as Thaddius Royce finished his declaration offering his life's work to free a woman he barely knew, a hush fell over the saloon. Even the whiskey-soured men who jeered minutes earlier now stared, stunned, unsure whether to laugh, cheer, or hide. Eliza, still standing on that splintered platform, took a slow, deliberate step forward. For the first time, she spoke. Her voice was clear, low, and carried the weight of something far larger than herself. "You don't have to give him your land, Mr. Royce." Thaddius turned toward her. Their eyes met, and in that moment, there was no fear in her sonly resolve. Eliza reached beneath the waistband of her worn dress and pulled out a slim, leather-bound notebook. The moment it was in her hands, Vernon McCain's face turned from smug to pale. She held it up for the crowd to see. "This," she said calmly, "is a record of every transaction, every shipment, and every person Vernon McCain and his partners have trafficked over the past 7 years." Murmurs swept the room like prairie wind. McCain lunged forward, teeth bared. "She's lying. That book means nothing." But Eliza didn't flinch. She stepped off the platform and into the center of the room. "Inside this notebook," she continued, "are names, buyers, sellers, locations, routes across Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, and victims. Dozens of them, maybe more. Some of their families still don't know what happened." A grizzled man near the bar squinted. "How the hell would you know all that?" Eliza met his gaze. "Because I was sent here to find out." She reached into her boot and produced a small tin badge weather, worn but unmistakable. It bore the seal of the United States Marshal Service. "My name is Eliza Mayfield, and I'm a federal operative. I've been working undercover for nearly a year, tracking illegal human trafficking rings running through this region." Vernon McCain was always at the center. Someone cursed under their breath. The bartender dropped a bottle. One of McCain's hired men edged toward the door. McCain growled, reaching for the notebook. But Eliza anticipated the move. In a flash, she tossed it upward toward the rafters. The crowd's eyes followed it, instinctively giving Thaddius just enough time to step forward and drive his elbow into the chest of the thug beside him. A second man lunged, but Thaddius, strong despite his years, grappled him to the ground. A third attacker reached for a pistol, but was quickly disarmed by an unassuming man at the back of the room, another plainclothes marshal, it turned out, who'd been seated quietly by the piano the whole time. By the time the notebook hit the ground again, McCain was gone-slipping out the rear exit, but not far. From the back alley came a scuffle, then a metallic snap handcuffs. Moments later, a tall agent in a black duster stepped through the saloon doors, holding McCain by the collar. "It's over," Eliza said simply, reclaiming the notebook and tucking the badge away. "This saloon, this trade, his empire, it all ends tonight." Silence held for a long beat before a slow, respectful clap began from the oldest man in the room. Then another, and another, until even the drunkest among them understood they hadn't just witnessed a rescue. They'd witnessed a reckoning. For a moment, everything was still. McCain, now handcuffed and bloody-lipped, was being dragged through the saloon's swinging doors by the tall marshal in the black duster. The men who'd once howled and laughed at Eliza now stood with their hats in their hands, unsure whether to look ashamed or afraid. But silence like that doesn't last in a place built on whiskey, heat, and wounded pride. It started with the snap of a boot-tone of McCain's hired guns lunging from behind the bar, armed with a short-barreled shotgun. He fired once, shattering a lantern above the card table and plunging the room into flickering chaos. The saloon burst into motion. Tables flipped, chairs crashed, someone screamed. Smoke and lamp oil stung the air. In the mess of bodies and shadows, it was hard to tell who was fighting and who was running. But through it all, Eliza didn't flinch. She ducked low behind a crate of whiskey barrels, pulling a small derringer from her boot. Thaddius, meanwhile, shoved aside a charging drunkard and reached for a loose pool, Q-swinging it hard into the ribs of a man trying to reach Eliza. McCain's remaining thugs were desperate, cornered. 2 of them tried to make it for the side exit, but one was tackled by the bartender himself, who'd seen too many good women mistreated in that place to let it go on another minute. The other thug made it to the door but never outside. The same marshal who had taken McCain now blocked the path, his revolver drawn steady. Up above, the rafters creaked as someone tried to climb for a better shot. Eliza noticed first. She shouted, "Rafter north corner." Thaddius didn't hesitate. He grabbed an empty whiskey bottle from the floor and hurled it with a farmer's precision. It struck the beam with a loud crack, and the gunman lost balance, tumbling hard onto a poker table below. By now, more lawmen were filing indigents from the Marshal service who'd been stationed throughout town, waiting for Eliza's signal. They wore no uniforms, just the dust and grit of everyday folk, but they moved with practiced purpose. In minutes, the saloon was secured. McCain's little empire had crumbled, and the crowd knew it. As smoke cleared and lanterns were relit, Thaddius helped Eliza to her feet. Her face was smudged with ash and grit, but her expression was steady. "You all right?" he asked, voice low. She gave a small nod. "Better than I've been in years." They looked around at the wreckage-broken chairs, spilled liquor, the unconscious groans of McCain's men. But they also saw something else. Townsfolk stepping forward to help, righting tables, offering cloths for wounds, and perhaps most importantly, meeting Eliza's eyes with something that hadn't been there before. Respect. It wasn't loud. No one gave a speech. But something had changed. This town had seen a woman they'd mock stand tall against the devil and win. A young stable boy approached her, no older than 15, his freckles standing out against his dusty skin. "Miss Mayfield?" he asked nervously. "You really a law officer?" Eliza knelt down slightly, meeting his eye. "I was. Might be again someday. But tonight, I'm just a woman who'd had enough." The boy nodded slowly. Then, surprising even himself, he tipped his hat. Behind them, a marshal finished writing out a list of arrests. "We'll be taking McCain and the others to Yuma for trial. Might take weeks, but they'll hang." Thaddius looked over. "And her?" The marshal paused, looked at Eliza, and smiled. "She can go wherever she wants. She earned it." And in that moment, as dawn's light crept through the windows, Eliza Mayfield wasn't just a rare woman with rare skin anymore. She was the one who brought justice to a town that had forgotten what it looked like. The saloon was quiet now, its windows boarded, and its doors sealed by the marshal's orders. McCain and his men were on their way to Yuma, shackled in the back of a wagon with federal papers tucked beneath the seat. The town, once a place where cruelty passed for entertainment, was changed. Not completely, but enough. Eliza Mayfield didn't stay to watch the trial. She'd seen enough chains for one lifetime. Instead, she packed what little she owned and rode with Thaddius Royce toward his ranch in the foothills, where the land stretched wide under Arizona sky, and the silence was something gentle, not suffocating. Thaddius hadn't asked her to stay. Not at first. He'd merely said, "If you want quiet, you'll find it there. If you want work, there's plenty of it. And if you want to leave, well, I won't stop you." Eliza didn't answer right away. But when the wagon crested the ridge and she saw his land fields of rye and sorghum, an old barn leaning a little to the west, and a porch swing that still creaked in the breezes, he made her decision. "I'm not a guest," she said quietly, "and I'm not looking for charity, but I'll work if you'll have me." Thaddius didn't smile, not exactly, but he nodded once, and that was enough. The days that followed were filled with sweat and dust, mending fences, planting seeds, scrubbing floors, and fixing what the desert had worn down. Eliza traded her federal badge for calloused hands and sunburned shoulders. She learned how to hitch a plow, how to calm a skittish colt, and how to cook over an open flame with just salt, beans, and bacon fat. But more than the land, she was learning to trust the rhythm of a life that wasn't on the run. In the evenings, they'd sit on the porch, sometimes in silence, sometimes trading stories. Thaddius told her about his late wife, a schoolteacher with a temper and a laugh like spring water. Eliza spoke of Washington in careful pieces, never too much at once, just enough to let the past breathe without letting it take over. One night, as the stars burned bright over the dark horizon, she turned to him and asked, "Why did you do it? Back at the saloon, why me?" He didn't answer right away. He just looked out across the field, where the wind moved like a ghost through the tall grass. "Because my daughter had the same eyes," he said finally. "Same way of standing tall when the world tried to push her down. She didn't make it, but you did." Neither of them spoke after that, but they didn't need to. It wasn't Lovenot yet, and maybe never in the way most folks expected, but it was something steadier, a kind of partnership built not on rescue, but on shared survival. And slowly, as spring edged into summer, the ranch began to change. The porch swing got oiled, the barn was painted fresh, a new fence went up along the east pasture, and inside the house, 2 plates sat on the table every night, not out of habit, but choice. It had been 3 months since Eliza settled into life on Thaddius Royce's ranch. The fields were green with promise, and for the first time in years, Eliza could sleep without a pistol beneath her pillow. But peace was never meant to be permanent not for people like her, not when the world still carried shadows. One hot July afternoon, she and Thaddius hitched the wagon and rode into town to buy feed, flour, and spare wire for the pasture fence. The market was bustling, filled with chatter, the scent of horses, dust, and fresh-baked bread. That's when she saw it. Across the way, near the general store, a large man was dragging a red-haired girl no older than Tenby the arm. The girl's freckled face was twisted in pain, her small legs scrambling to keep up. "No use crying, you belong to me now," the man barked. Most people averted their eyes. A few shopkeepers frowned, but said nothing. But Eliza didn't hesitate. She stepped off the wagon and strode straight across the street, boots thudding on the dirt. Her voice rang out, calm but commanding. "Let go of the girl." The man turned, startled. "This ain't your business, lady." Eliza's stance didn't waver. Her pale skin, bright under the Arizon. The man turned, startled. "This ain't your business, lady." Eliza's stance didn't waver. Her pale skin, bright under the Arizona sun, seemed to glow like justice made flesh. She looked the man in the eye and spoke again louder this time, for the whole street to hear. "I was once put up for sale. People bid on me like I was livestock, and I said nothing. That silence nearly killed me. Now the crowd was watching. I will not stay silent again." The man scoffed, tightening his grip. "She's mine. Paper says so." Thaddius, now beside her, folded his arms. "That may be, but I reckon the sheriff would still like to see that paper." Just then, the girl bit down hard on the man's hand. He yelped and let go. Before he could react, Eliza stepped between them. "Go," she told the girl, and the child ran straight into the arms of a shopkeeper's wife. The man tried to lunge again, but Thaddius blocked him with one step. Minutes later, the sheriff arrived and took the man into custody on suspicion of trafficking. Eliza gave her full name, badge number, and a statement. As they walked back to the wagon, the street was quiet again. "Wasn't your fight?" Thaddius said softly. Eliza climbed into the seat and looked out over the town. "Maybe not. But it was her life. And that makes it mine, too." Months passed. The seasons rolled gently across the Arizona hills, and life on Thaddius Royce's ranch settled into a rhythm of quiet dignity. No one in town spoke of Eliza Mayfield with pity anymore. Instead, they spoke her name with a kind of quiet reverences, if to remind themselves that heroes didn't always wear a badge or carry a gun. Sometimes they wore old boots, carried calloused hands, and had skin as pale as snow. One morning, Thaddius took a worn cedar board and carved the words himself. With Eliza standing beside him, he nailed it to the wooden arch above the ranch's gate. Mayfield Ranch, a home where no one's for sale. It wasn't just a name, it was a vow. Word spread. Travelers came by, not to gawk at Eliza's condition like before, but to ask if they could lend a hand, work a season, or just find a place to rest where judgment didn't follow them like a shadow. Some were runaways, some were war-worn, some were simply broken. But they all found something in Eliza's Isa message she no longer needed to speak aloud. "Here, you matter. Here, you are not for sale."